I can't be fun.
Nebraska and Iowa. Mine on Monday.
Yeah.
Yes and no, I mean, they haven't really given like more on one side. But, you know, it's still usually heavy rains and thunderstorms. There are a few areas here in Arkansas, but much better than in Fayetteville. I don't know, it's because of where we're located. We're definitely, you know, now it's working right to base and the Boston. So the Boston Mountains have shields. We've got almost nothing right in our area. But still, yeah, it was definitely. Now, one day, I mean, they were, you know, heavy flooding, but in our area, 10 inches easy, and they can up to more. Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So you guys laugh, but when I roast my pigs, I always.
It did help.
That's the initial flame. You have to use it the second time on, the first time.
Now we're now ahead of.
That's true.
When they take out the old freon based air, apparently they pump all that out.
Yeah.
What they do is really valuable, and they recycle
Yeah, something. It's interesting.
In my spare time.
Yeah, we look better than
And
this.
advanced legal research classes.
Yeah, it's something that really needs to be done. I've been trying to say, we're working on and I was trying to find some way to make
Where I'm from, that would go over really well. That was your popular where you're where I'm from, what kind of seed?
Complaining about the paper? I'm just saying.
It does.
I did it with my hedge trimmer. Pulled my hedge trimmer up. And you're like, I thought we got it afterwards. I was thinking, oh, that was But now if you do it on that screen,
You need the pen.
How different can it be?
oh yeah, like that. You know, what classroom out there has whiteboard? And give you a fresh start, so you can also
Something cheerful.
Hello, Jenny. How are you?
That's interesting.
That's hardly cheerful.
No, but I mean, at least it's not Cali. I'm sort of Cali'd out, to tell you the truth.
I'm afraid at some point around noon I realized, gee, I had enough time. I looked around and I thought, you know what? There's a branch of towels down on called Halstead, just below the University of Illinois in Chicago. So I live down there. It's probably about a 2-mile walk, but it was fun to do and got me out and walking around. Let me think, what else can I tell you that's cheerful?
Been doing a lot of emailing with my institution, which has increased my
Figure out the future. So how are things at your home institution?
Oh, no. Just too much fun.
I decided I would not bring any sort of electronic communication.
Well, here's the question. Are you going to go back to 2000? Because that's what happened to me.
I'll deal with that later.
The problem is,
I saw your list, that's what he is.
in those 2000 emails. Okay.
Well,
Probably wouldn't have remembered it.
I'll hope to deal with those when I get there.
I was paying more
I
attention.
don't often do this, get completely away from electronics. But I decided between having something to carry on with the laptop or that I want to bring one of my instruments with me. I'm going to bring my mandolin.
I probably got
That way.
the PowerPoint on here somewhere.
I can have nice things to
really? Did you really do that?
Absolutely.
Wow. Wow.
Because I can carry that on. It's small enough that they don't affect me. Well, it's going to be fun down in the hole. So it's a bit of an overkill.
Wow, that's impressive. So, like normal and rational.
Well, what do you hear from people at Pitt?
You know, I was going to ask you actually. The only person I still communicate with is Mark Silverman, and I have not heard from him.
It's so funny. He's such a good person. And yet,
You're exactly right.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep that.
it's a side of him that I didn't think was
I also have something, I mean,
I thought, you know, I did not think anything wonderfully sort of sentimental about it. He has at times said, parishioners. I don't know that he's communicated that.
He said that in the business class. I think the people at Hastings will tell you that the parishioners have led just to continue the analogy.
It's fun and nostalgia to look back upon it all. But I think he fails to see that we're all young now.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to welcome you to the last hour of Friday. And I hope I can make it worth your while. Kind of an auspicious title, the Law School Classrooms of the Future. The future is very hard to predict, as you know. If you live long enough, you learn that even with greater certainty. As an illustration, I worked on a project I teach at Brigham Young University, by the way. My name's Larry Farmer. And worked on a project that started in the late 70s, but really took off in the early 80s, where we were trying to build software tools that would allow lawyers to automate the delivery of legal services, particularly document automation. We worked together with Les Publishing Company on that, and we had a meeting and we decided, you know, it's probably going to take a while for this to take off. But we would expect it will be the late 1980s before lawyers universally use this software and are benefiting from it. And so we got underway with the project, and the software evolved and is actually still in play today and being used. But It's not universally used yet. We're only 3 or 4 decades off. Professor Henderson referred to it this morning as something that lawyers are likely to use in the future. So the future is certainly an unknown that we're tinkering with here today. So with that caveat, let's talk about the future and what it might look like for legal educators and with respect to how they teach and how you teach legal skills in particular. So, I want to start though with a couple of definitions. One of them is blended learning. You've had a lot of sessions at this conference on flipped classrooms, and flipped classroom is a subset of the blended learning notion in part. Let me explain. Blended learning, here's some people predicting the future. Blended learning use in higher education has grown rapidly and is predicted to become the new traditional model or the new normal in course delivery. Okay, this was in 2007. Blended learning is likely to emerge as the predominant instructional model of the future. Now, we all may have a conception of blended learning. Here's a definition. The most common use of the term blended learning denotes courses that include a combination of traditional face-to-face and online instruction. Now, that definition isn't universally shared, but the most common use of blended learning assumes something like this. You put it in a Venn diagram. You have face-to-face learning environments such as this, and then you have distributed or computer-mediated learning, and they intersect in some classes more or less overlapping with each other. Now, the question is, what's overlapping? Learning has always been blended. You give homework assignments, people go home, read their text, come back. So not everything is face-to-face. But what's different is they're talking here about computer-mediated online learning, and there's a good deal of that going on. But if you take the more precise notion of blended learning, you look here, see if I can make this thing work. You start here with the traditional face-to-face classroom, no online components, and right here where the red is the typical classroom today. It's sort of technology enhanced. People are going out and getting some of their information from the web. There are assignments to do things that involve online activities. Blended learning is typically thought by many not to be this, because there's no reduction in face-to-face contact time. Now, the flipped classrooms that people have been talking about at various sessions I've attended would fall into this area. At least as they described them, I didn't hear anything about reducing class time, but providing what was normally handled in terms of content delivery in the classroom, outside the classroom, and then moving activities normally considered homework or other kinds of activities outside the classroom into the classroom. That's the flipped classroom. Now, if you have a flipped classroom in a blended environment, that's something different. Blended learning, in its narrowest sense, the one that I like, is it involves a reduction in face-to-face contact time. When you're flipping the classroom, you're flipping it and so that the outside information, a portion of it may be substitute for classroom seat time. And when you get to you can still bring in the outside activities and practice within the classroom. But blended learning, and the way that I want to talk about it today, involves a reduction in seat time. A reduction, so you're substituting something for face-to-face contact with students. And as you're going down this continuum, you get mostly online or completely online with no face-to-face contact. Now, that definition was made before by people who weren't thinking about the future that we're in now, because if you think about it, what form will face-to-face contact take in the future? What form does it take now? I teach a lot of classes, this being one of them, that's me grinning in the corner, where we're entirely online, but it's face-to-face. All of our contact is, we're looking at each other, we're talking to each other, it's real time. And so you can have face-to-face instruction that doesn't involve seat time in a classroom, or it may. So here's another definition. The future face-to-face synchronous video to a continuum to online asynchronous instruction. So another way to look at it is you start out with mostly face-to-face nominal asynchronous components. Asynchronous being learning activities that take place not only separated in time, but in place from the instructor of the course. Blended learning in that context involves a reduction in synchronous face-to-face contact substituted for by asynchronous instruction. So there's less seat time even in the online environment in a blended learning environment. So you can have blended learning that is a reduction in face time in a classroom, or reduction in face time in an online environment. That's the context that I want to lay out so that we can look at distance education as defined by the ABA Standards 306, which you're probably familiar with, but let me go over it. And there's a draft 311 now that has worked its way for several years through the committee process, and either this year or next year is likely to replace 306 as the standard for distance education as set forth by the ABA. Let's take a look at those, and we'll come back to this notion of blended learning and see what impact the ABA has on online instruction. There's likely to have. Okay. This is a couple of relevant sections from that. Let's take a look at one of them. 306 says that distance education is the separation in time or place between the instructor and the student. Okay, we're familiar with that. 311, which will replace it, now defines distance education as the separation in time, place, or both between the instructor and the student. That didn't change, so our world isn't, the rug hasn't been pulled out from under us here. So they're defining what is distance education as one thing, and then it also has a second part, which is that you use technology to deliver the instruction. So it assumes that there's a separation in time and place, and that it's mediated. It's fairly complex. You can see that the language has become more elegant. The course includes courses offered principally by means of, et cetera, correspondence, audio. Now they say the use of technology to deliver instruction. Not so precise in some ways, perhaps, but very nice. So distance education is two things. Turns out to be three. Courses that involve separation in time, place, and that's it. And the use of technology to deliver that instruction, to manage that separation. And then there's one other element. In the interpretation of 306, It also says that courses in which 2/3 or more of the course instruction consists of regular classroom instruction shall not be treated as distance education. Now that's the part that's very interesting to me. And if you look at the new one, it's again more succinct and easy to understand. Distance education is an educational process in which more than 1/3 of instruction of the course is characterized by the two things that we've read already. So distance education doesn't happen until you get more than 2/3 of the course, more than 1/3 of the course mediated by technology and distributed to students outside the presence of the instructor. So what does that mean? It means blended learning. Come back to the blended learning instruction, or the definition, where blended learning is a reduction in seat time replaced by online instruction of some sort or another. What the ABA has done is opened the door for extensive amount of blended learning to take place in all second and third year classrooms. That's because this doesn't apply to first year instruction. You can't have distance education in the first year. Students can't register, as you know, for distance classes until they've completed the first year. So the implications of that are what I want to talk about today. That allows for a wide range of experimentation, no limits on whether it's asynchronous, synchronous, what the proportion of that is, or how close you come to the edge. It's a blanket statement. If 2/3 of your instruction involves face-to-face contact in a classroom, 1/3 of it can be anything else, and it can replace seat time in the classroom. So we have the latitude to experiment with all kinds of educational innovations, including distance education, which takes the full gamut of your seat time. It can be this online blended learning where 2/3 of your synchronous video contact with your students qualifies as the first part of this, the 2/3 of the instruction, and 1/3 can be asynchronous in a distance class. Or the entire thing could be asynchronous. If you go back to that continuum, you can have a synchronous through asynchronous class and include blended learning in the process. So that allows us 700 minutes of instruction in every second and third year class that can be use distance methods and substitute for seat time. So you have 1,400 minutes of regular class instruction. This is in addition to the limits they set on how many credits can be distance education. All credits can involve distance method, but only a limited number can go beyond the 700 minutes of instruction using distance methods. I've listed that as a 3-credit course here. Of course, 2 credits would be adjusted appropriately. Okay, now the ABA standards further limit distance classes. Right now in 306, you can't have more than 4 credits per term of distance education, and no more than 12 in your entire second and third year curriculum that a student takes to qualify for their degree. And you can't be in the first year. You have to be out of the first year. 311, which will replace this, now allows 15 semester credit hours of distance instruction, or distance credits, and again, limits the first year, and it doesn't have any per semester constraints. So that means a student can be off campus and if you offer distance classes, can take a full semester of credit away from the law school, if they haven't already, and still have those credits apply to the JD degree. Now, if you add on top of that, that every other class in the law school can include up to 1/3 of its instruction being by distance method, the ABA, while many people involved in distance education think, boy, this is protecting, this organization is trying to protect legal education and the institutionalized aspects of legal education from its competitors, et cetera. Whatever their motivation, they've opened the door to vast amounts of experimentation. Now, does that mean there's been a flood of experiments? Probably not. My law school, I'm the only one experimenting with these things. Well, no, our externship program and some others are now starting to experiment with it. But it hasn't, it didn't open some floodgates, but it does open up the opportunity. So the 4 credit hours per term is gone, it's now 15 credits per semester. Now there's one other constraint. This is a big one. The New York State Board of Examiners has issued its own guidelines. They're not content to go with what the ABA has put out. And they are consistent with the ABA in the sense that distance education, they go along with this idea that you can have up to 1/3 of your instruction be by distance methods and not call it a distance class. So students aren't affected by the rest of it until you cross that boundary. They only allow 12 credits, so I don't know whether they'll adjust that when, probably will, when 11 comes out, 311. But they do have this severe limitation here, that the study has to be primarily synchronous. That doesn't mean it has to be face-to-face, because they go on to say that the students and instructor simultaneously interact in a regularly scheduled class, albeit from separate locations by means of online web conferencing, video conferencing, or other means as to provide students opportunities to interact with the student, the instructor, and other students that are comparable to those in the classroom. So they recognize online synchronous video as approximating the classroom experience and accept those credits. But down here, no credit shall be allowed for correspondence courses, and no credit shall be allowed for distance education courses offered principally by asynchronous means. Which means once you cross that 1/3 back boundary, if you're principally asynchronous, your credits aren't going to allow, your students aren't going to be able to use those credits when they apply for the New York State Bar. So that leaves open synchronous courses with some blended asynchronous elements. So the asynchronous and synchronous, the way I read it, asynchronous should cross over that 50% boundary on the distance part of your instruction. So you can have 12 credits that are 51% synchronous and 49% asynchronous in terms of your seat time. And the New York Bar will accept it. I'm not sure I'd go close to that line, but they also accept the 1/3. So where are we at? We're facing several possible futures. You know, that there are multiverses out there, and we just could be going off into any one of them. And I don't know which one. Well, we'll all go into all of them, of course, if there is such a thing. But what I want to talk to you about and to have us discuss today is what might the future look like given where we're at now, the trajectory of the ABA, and in terms of allowing distance education, and the forces that are in play that have caused this to come about. Okay, let's now this is a little tedious slide, but some good information in this. What might future classrooms look like? Now, classroom, I got it in quotes because it's a metaphor. Classrooms mean, couldn't figure out a word for it, it means not only the pedagogy that you're using and the methods that you're using to deliver that pedagogy, but the physical location where you might be, all of those things listed as to what distance education is about. So the future might be traditional instruction in enhanced, technology-enhanced classrooms. That's really where we're at now. If this isn't a technology-enhanced classroom, I don't know what is. We've got a restaurant panel up here, you've got these monitors, the ability to do projection, audio, sound, movies, all of that. So we're teaching in a technology-enhanced classroom. Undoubtedly, they could bring in video conference guests or speakers, connect you to other classrooms somewhere in this building. And so instruction now takes place in the technology-enhanced classroom. So basically, line one there is future could be just like Langdell envisioned it, that nothing's going to change. Could be blended courses will emerge now that they're allowed, that seat time can be replaced, and that experimentation will take place, and a lot of instruction will be by instructional video or other online methods for delivering instruction. Third one, synchronous video-based courses in video-enabled classrooms. Now that translates into a remote instructor. We're doing that next year at our law school. We'll have 2 instructors, one in New York City and one in South Carolina, that will be teaching courses in a video-enabled classroom. So like the Wizard of Oz, they will appear on the front wall and larger than life, and with booming audio, and they will see the students in the room. We don't have a fully video-enabled classroom yet for this kind of activity, so we're limiting it to 10-person classes next year. We're building a classroom for the following year that's designed for just this sort of thing, to bring in remote instructors who are actually teaching students who are sitting in a classroom. The reason we're doing that is we've experimented fairly extensively with online, fully online, face-to-face video conferencing enabled classes, and we're finding a limit based on the technology we have of 10 or 12 students per class as kind of the functional limit of what you can effectively deal with there. We want, law schools, of course, are mass education. They want to teach more students per class. And so we're building a classroom that will have up to 30 students that can be taught by a remote instructor, and the instructor can see every student in a panoramic view of the room with sufficient clarity that they can watch and react and call on students almost like the instructor was present. In fact, this class will be taught by a person who does nothing but teach online classes. So that's one view of the future that is currently the present, or near present. It will be next, beginning in the fall of 2014. This fall we'll experiment with it, but we'll have a true classroom to do that the following fall. That allows for a future in which instructors and students can follow the traditional model to an extent for the 2/3 of the time where the student has to be in, unless the ABA changes its rules. But the instructor doesn't have to be present and can come in from anywhere and may have special skills and knowledge and domain knowledge that you want to bring in. Okay, joint classrooms using synchronous video. We've experimented. The remote instructor doesn't have to, of course, teach just one classroom. You can have a wall of classrooms. Utah State University does that. They have 21 satellite classrooms around the state. And they have a facility in Logan where they You can bring in, they usually go about 3 to 4 of those classrooms at a time, satellites, so that the students don't have to matriculate from the campus ever. They simply come to these satellite classes, they can register for degree programs. They teach 300 classes a week that way. Separate classes in these 20 different locations. So you can have a remote instructor. Now they typically have the instructor in one of those classrooms, but there's no reason the instructor has to be there. So that's a view of the near-term future. They're already doing that, is that you can have simultaneous classrooms, teach interviewing and counseling in 4 law schools at the same time, and that covers that part of the curriculum with one instructor who is in South Carolina, for example. Okay, and in the multiple classrooms, there's a lot of, we've experimented with that. We did a joint class with Duke a couple of years ago, where we simply brought the classes together and co-taught. The Duke instructor and we did class. Okay, synchronous video-based blended courses in video-enabled classrooms. It just goes on and on. The configurations here are expand out both in terms of the percentage of time you do one thing or another, and so the future has all kinds of configurations in it. Here's the asynchronous courses. A lot of LLM courses are taught this way now, fully asynchronous. They're online. Some really have some excellent courses like this. Vermont Law School has a terrific LLM program that's taught asynchronously, but they can't use that with their undergraduates because they're so close to New York, of course, as is everybody in the country. You have MOOCs. I have no idea what's going to come of them, but MOOCs are intriguing asynchronous variants. And then, of course, whatever will be, will be. It's hard to predict what we don't know, what we haven't seen, what inventions will come along, like mobile technology that's evolved over the last 15 years or so. Those are any configurations I left out? Must be something. There must be a future that you know that I don't know, or haven't conceived of. Einstein, if I remember, I think it was him, said that the universe is not only more complicated and stranger than we can imagine, but it is stranger than we will ever be able to imagine. Well, we're not into something that complex probably, but we don't know what's coming beyond these kinds of things. But these are certainly changes in the way classes are taught now. So near-term learning spaces, teaching and learning spaces, a remote instructor. Now this is something we've been experimenting with and like a lot. We give our remote instructors a teaching station. Teaching station this coming year will consist of 2 32-inch monitors, each one with a Lenovo, it's called a Tiny, it's a Lenovo, a very small Lenovo, but a very capable Lenovo processor bolted to the back of it. And so that the instructors can connect to the class, whether it's online or it's one of these video-enabled classrooms, from different lines, and control the signals and what's on. You have 3 monitors, there's 3 screens up there. The instructor can put themselves in the middle, the content on different types of content on each side, and make it easy to use from their remote location. So you can't have remote instructors without enabling them to be effective, is our experience, and we tinkered with that. And so we give them teaching stations. You think, boy, that's an adjunct professor out there in the middle of nowhere that's teaching this class, and we're spending money on them. Well, it comes to about $2,000, maybe $2,500. And this instructor is going to teach this class over a 4 or 5 year period. It's not a lot of money to spend to have that kind of skilled instruction if the instructor is worth it. We built student-enabled learning spaces. We did the same thing for students that we've done for the instructors. We built a series of cubicles. We're going to put these in our study rooms where we have large monitors that are also enabled to simplify connecting, and so you can see the others if it's an online class in a classroom, and have some more realistic experience. The instructor typically is life-size, sitting right across the table from you in these student-enabled learning spaces. Okay, I have no idea what's coming in the way of new monitors or other forms of video display, but my guess is it'll be just as magnificent as what we've seen over the last 15 years. This is an area where a great deal of investment and innovation is taking place. Who knows? We may have holographic instructors standing and walking around in front of the class, or instructors sitting there in front of holographic students whose images are being projected into the classroom. Who knows? But that's something that's coming. Clearly, new monitors, Google Glass, could substitute for the student technology-enabled workspaces. You just can't predict what that might be. And then, of course, the asynchronous space at home, work, or whatever, the new technologies may make that even a more inviting opportunity. Notice I put park there. We had a student, not this year, but last year, we had an online course with, who would go out and sit in a park just to make the other students jealous. Sit there with the breeze blowing by. It was in a fall semester class. Everything was green, leaves were falling, and just looked so comfortable out there. So asynchronous space could be anything as long as the technology supports it. And certainly mobile technology does that now. So, how is this? It's a tug of war now, right? Things don't happen easily or quickly in legal education, as we know. And so I use blended instruction to represent online instruction, or instruction that replaces seat time in the classroom with online time. And on the right is the future, and on the left, you'll notice with white knuckles and both hands on the rope is the present. Now, I don't know whether that metaphor is consistent with your experience, but it certainly said something to me. Okay, so here's the traditional instruction, the drivers. It's the Socratic Langdellian tradition is certainly a big driver. And associated with that is the faculty experience and skill set. Faculty at our law school, we have great opportunities to teach online, and only a few even have interest because they are immersed in these first three items. Now, with time and events and technology continuing to advance, that might change. You can't guarantee that. But the ABA standards limit pedagogical options, so that's a drag. On the other hand, they encourage it by making it possible. So, pulling on the rope to keep things in something approximating what we know now, we have the physical infrastructure of our buildings. We're in the process of renovating all of our classrooms, and the ones that have been done over the last few years, each one represents something more substantial in terms of using online technology in your, with your classes or teaching. For example, this new classroom that'll be video enabled for remote instructors. We hadn't even thought of that 2 years ago. Now maybe all of you have and you already have those, but we're just getting to it. Then the investment threshold. You've heard in the flipped classroom sessions that there's a cost in terms of time and resources to put together an online class. And to, I think in the long run there is for certain classes like mine, interviewing and counseling. What breakthroughs are going to happen next year in interviewing and counseling, Teresa?
I don't know, but I think that a lot of people are doing, rather than face-to-face, they're doing
Online.
online discussions and.
But in terms of the theory, nothing's going to happen next year, is it?
In theory, no.
Or the year, maybe 10 years from now. I've been teaching interviewing and counseling for, I don't know, since 1976. The only thing that's changed is I think I've learned a little more about what I should be teaching. The textbooks have gotten a little better, but no major breakthroughs. So you can invest in a course like that, and it pays off over time. If you invest in materials and in infrastructure that supports the course, etc. So, if we take the projections that we made back in the 1980s about how fast document automation would take place, and we were only off by 4 decades, how many of you think that the changes that we've talked about, just these kinds of changes, were widespread use of online methods, of blended learning, flipped classrooms across the curriculum, will happen in the next 5 years? Okay, 1. Is there another one? 2. Okay, how many in the next 10 years? Okay, more. Next 20 years. Next 50 years. Now you can vote more than once, so 50 years. Yeah, we'd all say, yeah, 50 years from now the world's going to be really different, and we'll have holographic instructors and whatever. You never know. It just takes time for change to happen. And especially when you're up against something like this, I no longer know how fast things will happen. Technological change can drive things quickly, or it can emerge gradually. So here's the drivers for disruptive innovation.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing though, is like the lecture format is from before there was printing and everyone would write their own textbook. And now printing books has been cheap for like 200 years and people still stand and talk. So I don't really, I mean, I just see like the same stupid things happening regardless of what happens with technology.
Okay. Well, you could well be right with that. Yes.
Well, at my school, we had a dean who wanted to start with blended classes. I was nominated to do it as an experiment, and he hoped everyone would turn to it for core courses. I'm now developing it for the 3rd time in the spring, and no one has any interest whatsoever besides me.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know how the Academy is going to withstand this and put it off, but I don't see it happening in the next couple of years.
Comment here?
Well, actually, a question, because if you look at some of the data and scholarship that's coming out around MOOCs, only in the last 6 months, what it's saying is that they're not working. So do we have any data and scholarship that backs up that this stuff works? We have our gut, we have like, oh, we can scale it up, it may be more inexpensive in the long run, but there's not a lot of data and scholarship that's come out, even from undergraduate courses, that says this is anything other than the same in terms of student learning outcomes.
There is some in the blended learning area. There's an extensive literature there, but it's not in legal education. In fact, I did a survey, I'm not sure I found a single article on, that was a rigorous research project on blended learning and legal education. So there's nothing to persuade the legal educators, for sure, at this point.
Oh, I just wanted to comment. Actually, it's super interesting you bring up MOOCs. That seems to be a super popular thing right now. And a lot of people do think that they failed, but what I would count, well, getting close, right? I mean, when you only have 2,000 of the 50,000 students complete it, you know, you're just like, oh God, what's going on? But I would counter, what is the point of a MOOC? If it is a massive open online course, I mean, if we just told students, yeah, it's free, come to our buildings, do what you want, you know, sit in class or not, I have a feeling the students just wouldn't show up, right? We'd get like the 10 students who actually do want to get their law degree, they'd sit there, they'd complete their courses, and we'd award them for their work. Scale that up to, you know, 50,000 people online and all the distractions and all the other things, and it will be a very specific type of student who will go through that class, be super self-motivated, and actually get anything out of it. I mean, and even within the MOOCs themselves, the instruction can be so different. Like you've mentioned videos. We can all make videos. I bet some of ours will be super good, and others of us, like clicky, just, you know, it'll be terrible. But I think there's hope there, but I think that it's not the tech necessarily that's the issue. It's more, what are we trying to do? And maybe that's the issue with legal education. Like, actually, I've been curious with professors to ask them, like, what would hold you back? Like, you seem to be super into developing and experimenting. What would hold everyone else back? Is it fear? Is it, well, not fear. Let me change that. Is it just we have no idea how this would work, or is it because legal education right now is honestly super strong? I mean, it's been proven over hundreds of years, and there seems to be no reason to change. And if that's true, like you asked her, the theories are not going to change. So what about the tech, though? Can we use that to change or enhance or et cetera?
The skill set isn't there either for most legal educators. That's like venturing out into the unknown for them to.
Standing on the ledge.
Teresa?
But I think there's another factor, which is that the legal profession has moved much further ahead in the use of technology than legal education, as far as I know. And I think that is a factor that's going to start demanding that the students receive
There, the increased pressure
from the profession, because I think that what we do in education, at least to some extent, is driven by the legal profession. And I do think that that's something else that will work in the other direction.
Yes.
There are a lot of factors here, plus and minus, and I was one of the 5-year people. I think I was in the 5-year because we will be forced into it. To help it along, it has to be a revenue driver, right? It has to expand our student base, and that's being done through LLMs and professional education and all those things that are in addition. But I think also to help it along, there are a couple of pieces that need to be put in place. One is assistance recasting existing courses for this medium. Socratic is particularly, well, it depends on how the Socratic is done. If it's, okay, I'm going to pick you, Mr. Hart, and I'm going to talk to you for the next 15 minutes, that works, because then you only have to have one student up. If you're more discussion-based, I think you may need a second person in the room who's managing which student's window pops up. Because I've done it in very small scale with a Google Hangout. I did it because we were snowed in and half my students couldn't come. And even, tech is not my problem, but teaching in the room, teaching to the screen, trying to figure out who's saying what. There's a reason why television people have a director in the back of the room saying camera 1, camera 2, and it's not the person on the screen. I think that this is the worst possible time to experiment, and the most important time to experiment at the same moment. But if the last thing that we all talk about, and it would be nice if there were unlimited budgets for everybody, if Cali could create an environment, a tool to make this work. So we didn't have to figure out, do we have a license for this or that, or do we have to roll our own? That would be phenomenal too. Unfortunately, like everyone else, Cal is stressed. But we're gonna have to do it because otherwise we're going to become increasingly irrelevant.
I think, yeah, there's tremendous forces from outside legal education in undergraduate and in secondary education. The movement toward this kind of instruction is really much further along than, it's not very far along in legal education. You don't have to be very far along to be much further, but I've sat on some university committees where they're really struggling with how do we implement these things, what's it gonna cost. It's a recruitment thing. And it will be a recruitment issue perhaps for law schools in the near term. What's your education like? And is it like some of the good education I had in my undergraduate years?
I was just going to comment on you. It doesn't take very much to be that much farther along. My sister teaches in Florida State, not at Florida State, but in the state of Florida, middle school. She teaches from her living room. She has roughly 500 students every year. It's completely asynchronous, although she does teach synchronous sessions for certain students at certain times. So as far as what's going to come, that's expanding like crazy. And when those students hit high school and then hit college and then hit graduate school, that's their normal. So if we haven't even gotten there by that point, we're not.
Eventually there will be some set of students that hit a tipping point.
Yeah.
Certainly. I taught from all over the place when it's an online class. I mean, space it becomes irrelevant as long as you have a good internet connection and good camera and good audio.
So one of the things that go into some of the rankings, and some of the things that the ABA asks yearly is your FTEs, your student-faculty ratio. How does this cut? I'm just curious. I mean, what does it go to when you're teaching, and it's the smaller the better. You know, they're looking for a 12-to-1.
I'm not sure what your question is, but
I guess I think that, so you're talking about 306 and 311, but some of the other data collection that the ABA does and some of the outside accrediting, or not accrediting, but ranking agencies really look at faculty to student ratios.
Right.
It would seem that this would blow your faculty to student ratio just off the charts in a horrible way, 500 to 1.
You're talking about if you're doing moves, I think. I mean, that's a whole different.
Now, if you're doing multiple classes at
oh
the time.
yeah, I'm not advocating these things. I'm just saying these are what's technically possible, and I agree. I think online courses tend to be smaller and less, and I don't know where MOOCs are going. I think for our institution, we're really looking at how do we deliver. I'm retiring next year. There's no one that can teach my class, and no one on our faculty that wants to. Okay? And do they go out and hire someone just to teach my class? It's interviewing and counseling. We have to have a skills curriculum. And if they recruited someone, the person wouldn't have their heart in it, wouldn't be a good class. We have this fabulous skills instructor in South Carolina that's willing to teach the class. Those kinds of drivers will help establish the acceptance of that kind of instruction. And with faculty traveling all the time, they can now meet their classes once we get this classroom built very conveniently. We'll just give them a mini teaching station to take with them, and they can teach from anywhere. Anyway, I think these outside forces are powerful. If you look at this list, will grow with time. I think disruptive innovation, as you're familiar with that concept, always starts out with lower quality, lower price. It's on the margins. The established companies or institutions really don't care if you take away a little bit on the margins because their profits and their investment is at a more substantial level, but eventually disruptive innovation overtakes. And that's the clear history of how innovation replaces inefficient and would become inefficient and lower quality approaches. So that's the question. How soon will these forces tug the rope to the future? And will they? Or do the drivers of traditional instruction are so powerful that it just isn't going to happen? My personal sense is these are powerful forces, and it's a tsunami that eventually will come roaring in, and legal education will not be able to withstand it. But I think clearly Professor, I'm blanking on his name this morning. Pardon?
Bill Henderson. Delivered it, or the guy who was quoted?
Yeah.
Good enough?
Oh, Alvin Toffler?
Or keynote speaker this morning.
Oh.
Anyway, he talked about, somebody asked him a question, he said, yeah, it'll be incremental, I believe that. Change will be incremental, it'll probably take longer, my view is it'll take longer than we anticipate, but it's going to happen. I just can't imagine, based on our experience, that it doesn't happen. I think I've described these for you. Joint traditional classrooms, online synchronous classes, we've done all of these. Actually, here's another driver that we haven't discussed. We have a publisher that's funding online materials for interviewing and counseling. Now, I've been talking to publishers about this for years. They've never been interested. Suddenly they're interested because they have e-textbooks coming along, and you're going to have online materials to link out to from the e-textbooks, and there aren't any in the area where I teach. And so publishers funded projects will trigger the resources that make it possible to have blended instruction, if that possible. And we have several proposals in with that publisher and other publisher to do that in a much more extensive way in the area we're in. So what have you experimented with? What drivers have I missed? By the way, our dean is supportive of this. We had a lot of deans while I taught there. All of them were tolerant of these weird experiments we were doing. This dean chaired our technology committee at the law school before he became dean, has a good sense of what technology is and where it might lead, and good knowledge of legal education and trends in education, and supports these activities. He's supported building this new classroom. He's supported the prospect of hiring this person to replace me as a virtual faculty member. You get a few breakthroughs like that. He isn't crazy. He doesn't want to, jump into online education in a way that could be unworkable or embarrassing or whatever, or bring down the wrath of the ABA. But there are pockets of support out there. Yeah, do you have a comment? Yes.
No, it seems to me that as much as anything, the junior faculty, who are going to be the people who have grown up with technology at some point, right? I mean, it's everywhere, are going to be the ones who will really be the drivers. It's not the case at our law school, I would point out, that actually some of our senior faculty are the ones who are very interested in technology.
We have
but
zero.
At some point, we're going to hit that tipping point.
There could be. Right now, we have 0 junior faculty who are willing to experiment because they're working toward tenure and they're spending all their time writing and doing traditional legal research, and but they are interested. When we have a meeting and we'll get together for a luncheon thing and discuss some of these experiments, they all show up and they offer insightful comments, but not one of them is willing to invest a minute in this kind of activity right now.
To follow on Cindy's comment, I mean, I don't know how the politics of this works. I don't know how people get onto the ABA, but I think it's not the faculties, it's the people who sit on the ABA. And there's like these gatekeepers that are preventing this tide, this momentum from going forward by establishing these somewhat different rules. I mean, 12 to 15 hours, big whoopity-doo. I mean, really, it's not that much. Again, it's getting back to this very minor incremental change. But it seems to me there's a lot of old traditionalists who are very scared of this tide of change. And you would think, like Jonathan said, I mean, if not now, when? I mean, when are they going to wake up to the realities of this new sort of new climate that we're living in? And I think it's going to take a lot of people in the ABA changing of that guard, not so much changing of the local faculty.
Actually, I've been tracking these ABA committees. I think they're out ahead of the law schools and the deans.
That surprises me.
Yeah.
I mean, why aren't they writing more progressive rules then?
Well,
Why aren't they dictating?
you don't have to be very far out to be ahead of them.
It seems so painfully incremental. You know, it's like, come on, people. Like,
I
have you not
think
seen the writing on the wall? I mean, people.
The ABA is sort of leading the charge in a very slow horse. But they've opened the door. I feel pretty positive about the ABA compared to where legal education itself is. Even though it's nowhere near where undergraduate or secondary education is or undergraduate.
I think there's no problem with the ABA rules. It's the inertia of present faculty. And I think you've nailed it. There's just no interest. I just came from another conference last week, and all the talk about flipping the classroom and all of the literature that's generated about it, nobody is doing. Nobody's doing distance learning or blending. Certainly blending is a wonderful first step and totally within the ABA structure could be done. It's just not being done.
Yeah. I think the ABA has opened a big door, but it isn't that you can do everything, but you can do a lot more than anyone is doing. We push the limits. I've been pushing the limits I go right up to that 1/3 and I have to worry about whether I have to cancel the class because I'll be over the third and things like that. But
Since it's almost 5 o'clock on a Friday, I
yeah.
don't know what the incentive is in law schools. I don't know that there is an incentive for curriculum development. The incentives are everywhere else.
Historically, that's true. No doubt.
I think that it's not that the ABA is dragging their feet or that faculty are behind. Where's the payout for them? That investment. Now, in certain institutions, that investment in time and curriculum change might pay off. In teaching satisfaction, as Norm's presentation last year said, in teaching satisfaction, you can't beat that. You're really rewarded for that. But to a younger faculty member, their rewards are almost every place but that.
Yeah.
The medical schools are out ahead of law schools, certainly, and methods of instruction and using these techniques. Someday, law schools may become an embarrassment, and then there'll be some incentives. Yeah.
Talking about the numbers, I think with applications going down, there are market pressures that are coming. 17% a year, and if we're not competitive in responding to what that decreasing market is asking for, I don't think we're going to survive.
There'll be certainly. It's 5 o'clock. Your point's a good one. Thank you, folks.
Take it to the bar.
Appreciate it.
Oh my God.
And this is something you're doing, right?
Yes.
I was like, hello. What are we talking about? No,